Peace to you, everyone. I apologize for my unshavenness. My appearance is not exactly the most pleasing at the moment. I'm leaving work right now. I would do this video at home, but I'm not going to have time tonight. And this is an issue that just came to my attention before I started my job for the day. So apparently the Muskogee Nation Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Freedmen getting citizenship rights based off the Treaty of 1866. Now, for those of you who are not new to the channel, you know that I have not been in favor of this. And most importantly, I've not been in favor of us being pressured to do it as a tribe. I don't want misinformation being sent out there. I want people to be able to make an informed decision, and I think it's a decision that the people need to decide. By the people, I mean the by-blood Indians, okay? Like, I don't think this issue's over yet, personally. This ruling has a lot of implications that the Supreme Court may or may not have foreseen, because a lot of talk is going on that our Constitution may not be valid. And I mean, how do we pick and choose what parts of it are valid if that Constitution, you know, I mean, if some parts of it are not valid, then is the whole thing valid to begin with? Is the Supreme Court even a Supreme Court? Do they even have the authority to make the judgment call that they just made? Because if they have that authority, it's based off the Constitution, if I'm not mistaken. And if that's the case, then that Constitution's valid, which means that the removal of the Freedmen is also valid. So this decision, there might be some problems because, or there are problems. There's legal problems for validating this decision in the first place. So yeah, anyway, think about that for a second. If our Constitution's not valid, the Supreme Court's not valid, and therefore it had no authority to make this decision in the first place. If they had the authority in the first place, they get it from the Constitution, which means the Constitution's valid, which means the Constitution that, upon its establishment, removed the Freedmen from the tribe would be valid. That means that the decision to remove them is valid, right? Do we not have a right as a tribal nation to make these decisions? Now, here's the other issue. I mean, it was mentioned in, because I was reading the Muskogee News earlier this month, the printed copy, because I get it mailed to my home. But basically, I mean, the whole idea of tribes being able to determine their own citizenry, it's been kind of established as far as, like, can you do a blood quantum requirement? A bunch of tribes have. There's no shortage of tribes that say, oh no, you got to be 1/4 or more just to be a citizen. You got tribes saying, oh, but you not only have to be 1/4 or more, but you have to be enrolled before a certain age, or oh, we stopped enrolling new citizens as of, like, oh, let's just say 2012 or whatever, and now we're in 2025. So you can't have new citizens until they reopen the rolls? It's just kind of all this weird, I mean, it seems crazy what's going on with these other tribes, but apparently that's valid. Do we as a tribe not have the right to determine our own laws? I mean, obviously we have to, you know, abide by the U.S. Constitution as well, because we're all U.S. citizens now, if we're born within the territorial U.S. soil, as per the 1924 Snyder Act, as I covered in a previous video. We were never going to lose our U.S. citizenship as soon as Trump got in office. Trump removing birthright citizenship has nothing to do with Native Americans having or not having U.S. citizenship. The Snyder Act already sets that in stone. So, anyhow, go watch that video if you're curious, because there's a lot of BS floating around in Indian country regarding that, okay? And it's proven to all be a bunch of fear-mongering. Okay? But let's get real. Do we not have the right to determine our own citizens? Can a blood quantum requirement not be established? Oh, but it can, maybe, but the Freedmen's thought to be allowed in the tribe because they're more protected than actual by-blood citizens, according to the Freedmen band. And it seems like Supreme Court is kind of like upholding their interpretation of things. So, it looks like they're going to be able to get citizenship. But is our Constitution valid? Is our Supreme Court valid? And hey, if it's valid, but we got to change some parts of the Constitution now, which means it's maybe always only been partly valid, okay, or whatever. Well, what parts are valid? Which parts are not valid? And if the Freedmen get to have positions in our government, they get to have representatives from their tribal towns that no longer exist. There's no Creek Freedmen ceremonial grounds. The 3 tribal towns that used to be the Freedmen tribal towns, they no longer exist. So they would have to reestablish them to send representatives from them. They would mean that our whole way of voting would have to go back to tribal towns. So that would mean that tribal towns would have to have actual legal authority, right? Think about that. So instead of being simply a ceremonial grounds now or a church now, there would have to be a literal secular authority from these tribal towns. Does that not make sense? I mean, maybe I got to reread some of this stuff, but, everyone's talking about the 3 Freedmen tribal towns and, having representatives in the Muskogee Nation governments. Well, how do you determine who the representatives are? And if they can have people in the government, what kind of positions can they run for now? Can they run for the office of principal chief? Second chief? Et cetera, et cetera? Can they run for these positions now? I mean, is that all valid now? But here's the thing. What about those of us who are less than 1/4 by blood? Can we now run for office? That's floating around right now. Like, what do we do? Like, should we have restriction on, because we have less Muskogee blood, but we actually have the blood, should we be restricted based upon our blood quantum? What about the Freedmen? Do they not have a Freedman blood quantum? Like, what percentage of Creek Freedmen are they, right? Or is Freedman just, oh, you're a Freedman regardless of blood quantum? I mean, well, what's the answer here? I mean, this is going to be a convoluted issue because, as I've covered in previous videos, I mean, oh, man. Based upon the imperfections contained in the Creek Treaty of 1866, anyone who's of the African race could just come on in within a year and become citizens. But also anybody of any race. It's like, come on in, come take our land. And you have all these people praising 1866 and saying, oh yes, heaven is shouting for joy right now because of this decision by the Muskogee Nation so-called Supreme Court. So-called because do they even have legal authority? Again. So, yeah, I mean, it's the so-called Supreme Court, our so-called principal chief, our so-called national council. Does it even have legal authority? And that's the whole thing. So it's like, I want to argue, yes, they do have legal authority. We, the people, elected them. Yes, our Constitution is valid, which means the freedmen were legally removed. And we can determine who our citizens are as a tribe. But that we get to vote on these issues. And if people want to vote the freedmen back in, that should be voted on. And correct information should be given to the people. That's why I've been making these videos on the subject, is because, and I know people are watching this stuff. I've been attacked, in some of the comments by certain freedmen individuals and also by non-freedmen individuals who are very much in favor of the Freedmen. Moreover, I have had people on Facebook sending me threatening messages. I've had that happen because of my comments on Facebook. And it's funny, but I've had this happen. I mean, it's, and some of these guys might be by blood, some of them are, but it's like, obviously they're the Freedman persuasion on this issue, and they're attacking me through Facebook messages, and some of them have these accounts that don't even have a profile picture, but they have a name, and they're from, Chakota or from Macintosh or wherever, and they're sending me these threatening messages. Okay. So I know people are watching my videos, they're reading my comments on Facebook, they're seeing this stuff. Am I going to be a target now? If we get Freedmen in the government who say, I remember that James Sadderly guy, he was posting videos against us becoming citizens of the tribe. Let's disenroll him and his son. Let's go disenroll all his kinfolk who are by blood. And I got documentation and photographs to prove it. I mean, I'm not a full blood, but I have ancestors that were. So, I mean, my by blood status is beyond contestation. Okay, just saying. Let's get rid of this guy because he's got too much of that colonizer blood. Even though, of course, I'm sorry, any non-native person in this country, racially non-native, is a colonizer. That means if you're black, if you're white, if you're Asian, if you're Filipino, and it looks native but isn't, you're a colonizer. Sorry, but it's true. But everyone's like, oh no, it's only the white people that are colonized. No. Every race that's not native is colonizer. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. So, but no, we got to go after those Stahetsky-looking descendants of Benjamin Perryman. Apparently, I got a cousin, or maybe he's an alleged cousin, who's been attacking. He was attacking me for a while. It was funny because, no, apparently I got too much Stahetsky blood, but man, he's a real Muskogee person, and I'm apparently not. Whatever. Stupid. So, anyway, we're going to see where this goes. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a stay was placed on this once again by the principal chief, like he did last time. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, am I holding my breath? Yes and no. I think that might happen, but I don't know for sure if it will. But do I think this issue's over? I don't. I don't think it's over. I think that if we have the right to determine who our citizens are, that's our right. That's not the federal government's job to say, oh yes, well, blah blah blah. And yeah, they didn't rule on this. It was our Supreme Court that ruled on it. But they also shot themselves in the foot in the process. And they shot the whole government of the tribe in the foot with this decision. I don't think this was done correctly. So, but that's my opinion. I mean, look, I'm just one, Muskogee guy who, I may not be living in Oklahoma right now, but I miss it. I went back to Kansas to go save my mom, and I went to Oklahoma. I'm like, yes, finally back here. Collected a jar of red dirt. It's sitting on top of my safe right now. I see it every single day. I am going to go back. I am going to go and do things. And it's going to happen. I missed the annual festival this year. Hopefully next year I can go. But yeah, I mean, we'll see what it looks like when that happens. It'll be like, here's the other issue that I have. Because the likes of Mario Solomon Simmons, the lawyer for the Freedmen, the main lawyer of so many years, he has been, even he, once Judge Mauser's decision was, had a stay put on it, and he was pissed, because he was bragging his ass off, pardon my language, but he was bragging, and then he was pissed, okay, He's going to start bragging again. I know it. He's going to do his little braggadocious thing. And it's going to happen. But he's pushing this idea that, you know, and this is a problem. And this is going to become a bigger problem probably in the future. Where it's like, oh, well, we were already, you know, Muskogees were already black, or there's a huge, you know, percentage of black Muskogees that were always here that were never from Africa. And they were enslaved by their red brothers because who wanted to be like the white plantation owners or whatever. This idea is floating around. Are our funds going to go to teach people this crap at Muskogee College of Muskogee Nation? Is that going to become one of the classes that are taught? I mean, what are we going to teach about this issue? And I do think that real Freeman history should definitely be, you know, taught. But at the same time, there's a lot of pseudo-history that's being promoted by some of these individuals. I hate to quote this name, but I think even Eli Grayson was kind of going off about this some 12 some odd years back on the social media. But I could be wrong, but I vaguely remember something about that. But Solomon Simmons, yeah, he was shooting his mouth off after Mauser's decision was de facto overturned. So, I don't know. We'll see how much bragging he does this time around, because he's going to be bragging. Now, why did they make this decision? Why did why do I think that the the Supreme Court made this decision? I think pressure. We don't want to look racist. We don't want to look like the bad guy. We don't want to look like we're, you know, whatever. And pressure. People keep pushing it. And they feel like they got to capitulate just to make the problem go away. In the process, they're creating a bunch of other problems, as I mentioned. And others that I mean, fall in that umbrella. Like, what's this going to mean for the funding that goes to our housing, for our tribal hospitals, and any sort of benefit that goes along with being a citizen of the tribe? Not that should be all our citizenship is for. I know there are citizens out there by blood who have more of the blood than I do, who are like, we should just kick out all of those. Anyone who's less than a quarter should be kicked out so the rest of us can have money. Those scumbags are in the tribe. And trust me, I don't like them either. Because that's not the answer. For me, I think we need to fix the problems created by the Dawes Roll. I think there's probably a significant number of freedmen that can be brought in as citizens by blood if we just go back to earlier rolls, provided that there's adequate documentation to prove that these individuals have by blood ancestors. And I've always been in favor of that. That way, they're not freedmen, they're by blood. They're actual citizens. And so, but I also think that anyone who's white, whose ancestors bought their way onto the rolls, if there's adequate enough information to back up the likelihood of that, because you can't trace before 1895 or whatever, or you can't trace back to before the Campbell Creek Roll. If there's adequate evidence that your ancestors were not actually Indian, you should be disenrolled. I'm 100% on board with that. And it doesn't matter if you're black or white looking. It doesn't matter. You can look Indian. If there's no proof that you're of Muskogee Nation heritage, you know, going back before the final Dawes, you should be disenrolled. I'm sorry. And there's individuals that never made it onto the rolls because they didn't want to be part of it for political reasons. And now their descendants, those who didn't make it onto the roll at the time, can't become citizens. So there's a broken our citizenship requirements are kind of broken. I understand that that's an issue. Our Constitution is not perfect. That's definitely an issue. So it needs to be amended. And I've been saying that for a while. But just saying, oh, well, 1866 is the supreme law of the land. Let's just bring all the freedmen in, regardless of any blood quantum, and that means our Constitution is possibly not valid. It's like, okay, well, you just subverted your own authority, basically, So, anyhow, those are my thoughts on the Freedmen issue. I don't think it's over, but it's like, how long are we going to fight this battle? Because on the other end, you have a valid concern, which is so many of our citizens have married outside of the tribe, and now we have less and less of the original Muskogee blood. We might have other Indian blood, like I've got some Cherokee, some actual Cherokee, but that doesn't get added onto my Muskogee blood quantum. My Yuchi is part of the blood quantum because the Yuchi are not a separate tribe. You got citizens who have one Seminole parent, but that blood is considered Seminole blood. It's not considered Muskogee, Cree Nation blood, even though they're Muskogee people too. Okay, so what do you do when the blood becomes thinner and thinner? Even if you have the phenotype, you look like a full blood, but you have less than a quarter of Muskogee blood, and therefore you cannot run for office. That's the thing. It's like, well, what do you do after a while? Because there's going to be these positions of authority that are elected positions that you do not have the right to run for. Not because you're a criminal, but because you don't have enough of the blood. So I understand that this is a real issue that we're going to eventually, maybe now is eventually, you know what I mean? Like, it was eventually going to have to be addressed. We're not creating enough full-bloods that are marrying the half-bloods, who are marrying the quarter-bloods, who are marrying the eighth, who are marrying the 16ths, and giving the children more Indian blood from within the tribe. So these are all problems that we have to realistically address. I mean, my son's mom is Colombian. She looks like an Indian. She has indigenous blood. It's obvious. My son has more indigenous blood than I do, but it's not Muskogee Nation blood. He only has half the Muskogee Nation blood that I have. So, I mean, it's just the blood becomes thinner and thinner. But then again, at one point, further back in time, it didn't really matter how much of the blood you had. It mattered what clan you belonged to. It mattered mostly who your mother was. That was the main determining factor. And I'm sure that factor has to do with why certain freedmen were listed as freedmen in the first place on the Dawes Roll, when they should have been listed as being by blood. Like I said, there's flaws in the Dawes Roll, and if we're going strictly by the Dawes Roll as the criteria for citizenship, we're making a mistake, and we've been making that mistake for a while, I think. So that needed to be amended, but the whole issue of the freedmen, though, I think should have been voted on. I don't think it should have been something, they say that it already was voted. They say the Constitution was voted on already in 1979. Okay. But then they're contesting whether the freedmen even had a right to vote in that one, or whether they did vote in it, or whatever. And the truth is, there's not enough, based upon the notes from the court, when each side presented its case, there wasn't really enough evidence one way or the other to say whether the freedmen got to vote or not, or whether they didn't get to vote. So I don't know. I just don't know, and I don't think they know. I mean, if there's a way to prove that would be nice, one way or the other, but we really can't. So it seems, unless they're withholding documentation, which is always a possibility. Anyway, I don't think it's over, but where do we go from here? Like I said, does Principal Chief, does he put a stay on this? And we keep fighting it, and just keep deadlocking it in the courts? I can see that as a possibility, but his special justices that he appointed, and it's obvious what he was doing. And it definitely looked corrupt, but I also understand why he was doing it. Like putting James Jennings in, like he obviously is for by blood only. So I can see what Principal Chief David Hill was doing. Did it seem like some shenanigans? Kind of. I don't know. I just think that we don't have enough people on the Supreme Court that have the balls, so to speak, to stand by the Constitution of the tribe. That's what I think. I think they're too afraid of looking bad, and then, getting the likes of Maxine Waters to try to defund us because we kicked the Freedmen out of the tribe in 1979. And of course, Maxine Waters is the type that says, I don't care what the law says. So at the end of the day, we have people in our tribal government that will kowtow to others. And that's what I think is going on. I hate to talk bad about anybody, but that's kind of how it feels. But regardless of where you stand on this, where do we go from here? Do we even have a valid tribal government? Our infrastructure that de facto has existed since 1979. It's been functional and functioning and growing and evolving and everything. And the bureaucracy and the laws and the policies and the healthcare system and all this stuff that we've had that's been building up and has been, and was built after 1979. Well, what, does it no longer belong to the tribe? You know what I'm saying? There's going to be some, I think ultimately it's going to be addressed. They'll just say, oh, well, this part's valid, but those parts aren't, as far as the Constitution is concerned. So they'll find some little, slick way of trying to just justify their own authority while still trying to sort of skirt the fact that they just subverted their authority by this decision. So, I don't know, man. I don't know. So, I say to the Freedmen who have been attacking me and those who haven't been attacking me, but who've been attacking the rest of us, and maybe haven't been attacking any of us, but simply have been jumping up and down about, this issue, about, 1866 being the supreme law of the land. I mean, for now, it seems like you've won. Maybe. I don't know. And if you have, well, great. You can call yourselves citizens of an Indian tribe. Are you really Indian? Because if you don't have our blood, you're not really one of us. You're not. No more than a white person, a Sadderly, or an Asian, or whoever who's not from this continent. You're no more Indian than them, even if you lived among us for a couple hundred years. It doesn't matter. We've had Sadderly living among us, peacefully among us, since the 1832 Parson-Abbott roll. It doesn't matter. If you don't have our blood, you're not an Indian. And so you can jump up and down and praise yourself and praise Solomon Simmons and, talk about how all of your ancestors are jumping for joy in heaven and whatever else. You're not ever going to be one of us until you start marrying one of us and having children with us. Then your descendants will become us. That's what's going to happen. Or you can keep marrying outside of the actual by blood citizenry and keep having now citizens who don't have any Indian blood. At least not from our tribe. I don't know. So I think the Supreme Court made a bad decision on this. I think they made a cowardly one too. But that's just my opinion. Maybe they believe that our ancestors were so noble in the way they chose with no pressure from anyone whatsoever at all to make the freedmen, to make them into citizens of our tribe, and that we have a covenant that we owe to our ancestors to honor that treaty, because if we don't, we are not truly being Muskogee people. And maybe that's everyone in the, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. I mean, maybe in that case I would say they're not being cowardly. I just disagree with their decision, and I hope it eventually gets overturned. I'm sorry, guys. I think it needs to be overturned until we have a day where we can have our Constitution be valid, and we can have complete sovereignty, complete authority over who is a citizen of our tribe. And then we can vote on this issue and decide whether or not we want the freedmen to be a part of our tribe. Until we have all of that, then I don't want the freedmen to be citizens. I don't want any non-Indian. And it's not because, they're black. I don't want white people who have no Indian blood being citizens of the tribe. I don't. You got to have our blood. Okay? You got to have Muskogee blood. Until there comes a day where we decide democratically, with a fair vote of the people, by, of, and for the people, to go ahead and say we want the freedmen in the tribe. And we want to give them a constitutional right to become citizens. They can't have a constitutional right because our Constitution might not be valid now. It's a mess. So it all happened wrong, in my opinion. And there's going to be repercussions. So stay tuned, because I will be covering that in the future. So, but for watching. Drive safe out there. And until next time, Hadam Chi Chatlis.